journalism at the Université catholique de Louvain. I'm also introduced because I had a vaccine-injured child. So my child was one of those isolated autism cases. He regressed after a DTaP vaccine, and we didn't do the MMR. So it's not just about the MMR vaccine. I wasn't an anti-vaxxer. I was really convinced that vaccines were useful and safe. Someone in my family had polio and he recovered from it, but I was really convinced that it was important. So it all comes from personal experience. I'm extremely happy that my son was able to recover his development, his full potential, let's say. So today he's 15 and he's doing very well. But we went to the regression. He couldn't speak, he couldn't communicate, he didn't have eye contact, he was flapping, he was always repeating things, screaming, head banging, etc. You know, the traditional, let's say, autism picture. So I was very happy to be able to recover him, to help him to reach his full potential through biomedical treatments, only through addressing the issues, the underlying issues that are happening at a biological level of autism. So after that, it of course took me several years to help him. And after that, I decided to speak about treatments, new options that could help autistic children. For example, everything that was related to the gut and to their medical issues. So I organized a congress 2 years ago to speak about new potential of those treatments. But I quickly find that it's very difficult, even today, to help the children, because once we start to speak about underlying medical issues regarding autism, then in the background you have the whole vaccine issue. Vaccines. Okay, if you speak about the gut of autistic children, for example, the link between a brain and the gut, well, then soon after that you have the idea that it can link to autism, to vaccine-related injury. So this is really blocking also not only compensation, but it's also blocking treatments for children. So this is why I was involved in trying to bring out, I'm also a journalist, so bring out the news about vaccine injury. So I am a member of two associations. One is the French League, although I'm Belgian, is the French League for Freedom of Choice, and also the Vice President of the European Forum for Vaccine Vigilance, which has member association in 26 European countries. I think we should have a reach, it depends, but potential reach of over 3 million contacts within Europe through various associations. And this we're also accredited at the European Parliament. So I want to pick up on the reasons why, you know, the global context, what is happening with pharma industry right now. Why do they suddenly want to push this vaccine agenda? Well, pharma is losing profits on the classic drugs. You know, you have issues with antibiotics resistance. You have a lot of problems with branded drugs that now get competitors from generic products. You have scandals from side effects, mediator, Vioxx, Virox, other, you know, many drugs. So they're losing a bit of money there. And the vaccines is a bit the grail of new investments. So it's a potential market that is just global human race, okay? We have a high profit, very high profit margin with vaccines. So for example, the Gardasil, the anti-HPV vaccine, well, it's about one dose is being sold in many countries at 130 euros, and it costs about €0.50 to produce one dose, you know, just the vaccine alone, you know, the production. 3 doses per child is, it's very profitable. You also have drugs that you can develop develop very fast. And you also have fast tracking, free promotion for government, and almost no liability that depends from one country to the other. If the government is mandating vaccines, the government also normally should refund vaccine damage. The situation is different in some countries. The manufacturers are still liable. So, cherry on the cake, the less vaccines are efficient, the more we can sell them, because we have booster shots. Okay? So, is that really the miracle of science? I think that Brian already explained a few things here, but we have waning immunity. Some people do not respond to vaccines. You have other strains developing, and you have also a shift from infectious disease to chronic disease, which is also a high cost for society. So this is all the vaccine miracle is now contradicted by new facts and also by fraud and scandals. This was a long presentation. I didn't expect to present today because I was expecting to come and see Mr. Kennedy, so I'm going to skip a few slides, but I will pick up on what Brian has told. So this is, you know, the movie. We're going to show the trailer right after that about this senior scientist, William Thompson, that Brian Hooker just exposed. So I'm going to draw for you a little political context, okay? But he has shown the scientific context. Now I will put it into the picture, linking to the measles epidemic and the fight for freedom of choice. Let's say that is now really become a democratic issue. So in August 2014, we have William Thompson, who takes contact with Mr. Brian Hooker here. You will hear in the trailer, he records him, and he really confesses that he's greatly ashamed for what has happened in the fraud at CDC. That study from William Thompson had actually originated after the famous MMR study and the fact that cases, you know, questioning, autism cases questioning the possible link with the triple vaccine had been brought forward in the MMR Lancet study by Dr. Wakefield and the whole team. It's not going to be about Dr. Wakefield here, but there was a question asked, you know, about those vaccines. And suddenly the study, because that study, this William Thompson study, was really used as the reference study to say that the debate was over after, you know, questions had been raised by the Wakefield study. Okay, so this question is a big threat. Okay, someone says, you know, I confess, I'm really deeply ashamed of what we wrote on the safety studies, and we committed fraud. So this is very troublesome. You cannot just say it never happened, it's bad interpretation. So what is the reaction? Well, there is a global strategic reaction. The next month, so that's in September 2014, there is a global meeting in Washington, in the White House, between representatives from the WHO, American representatives, all ministers of most health ministers of countries, defense departments, etc. Said, how are we going to react? Well, they work up a strategy. It's going to be the global health security agenda that is to generalize the principle of mandatory vaccination, implement a lifelong vaccination program all over the planet, control public, political, and scientific speech, and develop and impose new vaccines. So that meeting takes place, I think it's September, I don't think it's an error, but you can look it up, at the White House. And what do they decide? That meeting is the health security, so that agenda is about health threats in general. For example, nuclear incident is a serious health threat, okay? So it can be chemical, nuclear, bioterrorism, for example, or something like smallpox. Yes, smallpox was a real serious disease. So they go from the logic of smallpox and they say we're going to work out a system to implement actually mandatory vaccination coming from showing that disease are health threats. So what happens? How are we going to bypass individual rights in most countries? Because in France, Belgium, you have free informed consent, we have democratic rights, especially after the Second World War. This led to really the Charter of Human Rights, and we have many laws, legislation, the Vienna Convention. France has the Rapprochement. In most countries, Western Europe, we have very strong protection of individual decision, in free informed consent. So to bypass all this legislation, the only way to do it is to say, okay, we have a threat, a national security threat, so you can go over individual rights. And the security of the nation prevails over the one of the individual. So now it comes to redefine threat. Threat was originally meant for something such as smallpox, okay? But that logic of threat is now applied to a common disease, such as measles. So, there is a switch. It's drifting from smallpox, okay, very serious threat, to measles. And then this is where the measles scares comes in. So they say, okay, well, measles is so suddenly you have to make measles very, very dangerous thing. Because that's also an answer to people who say, my son has been vaccinated after a measles vaccine. So it's also a way to say that all those who claim to be victims and who want to have justice, suddenly we're going to make them, the victims, we're going to make them look like the criminals. Okay? So what happened then is that even if the threat is not real in terms, we don't see thousands of children who died from measles. In Belgium, for example, we have no mandates from measles vaccine. Coverage is very high, it's over 90, I think it's around 95%. We have endemic measles, every year we have measles outbreaks. Nobody's dying, we don't have high complications, severe cases, etc. Still. So from that threat, it becomes then, so even if the threat is not real, you cannot say, oh, so many people died from measles. It becomes a virtual threat. And then we say, well, the threat is that vaccination, not disease, vaccination is lowering. And this was not the case, for example, in France, where they just, pushed the mandates last year, okay? They went from 3 vaccines, mandatory vaccines, GTP, to 11 mandatory vaccines. They said, well, the vaccine coverage is going to be lower, but this is not the case. If you look at it, it was increasing every year. So this is not real. So now it's a virtual threat. And the threat is, because of the fake news, meaning because of actually the fraud that we just saw here, that we want to cover up, because of the fake news, there might be less vaccines, so, this is a virtual and permanent threat. And once you push it for the measles, you can push it for all the rest, for all the other vaccines. Because the plan, we have 280 vaccines in the pipeline, and the plan is to have lifelong, not just vaccination for children, but lifelong mandatory vaccination for the whole population. Okay? So I was in a session at the European Parliament a few months ago, and this is really this plan of, I'm not just saying this, it was from the number 2 of the Health Commission, okay, who spoke about this. So this lifelong plan, it's all in the documents of the European Commission. So free speech is actually the new threat, okay? So what are they going to do? What do they decide? They decide we have censored news now, everywhere. And what happened is that when Vaxxed, I'm going to pick up on Vaxxed, you know, when William Thompson told his story, they made that film, that was going to show the trailer with Brian Hooker, and then one MEP, one member of the European Parliament, decided she's a biologist, so she knows it's not black and white, and she knows that, you know, there is a lack of safety studies, and they want more transparency, so she wanted to open up a safety debate on vaccines. And so we have, perhaps some of you have met Mr. Montanari. I think he came here to speak about nanoparticles. We have Luc Montagnier, who was the Nobel Prize for the discovery of HIV in France. We have Andrew Wakefield, who wanted to speak about the fraud and the need for more safety studies. And so that debate was censored at the European Parliament, but then relocated. So after that, I'm not going to show you, but you know that in all over Europe, there have been protests. Zero media, but that doesn't mean that the people are not aware. So that was in Rome, that was in Italy, 70,000 people in Pesaro. Okay, so what is the plan? It's world immunization with a priority on measles, real-time surveillance, and this is going from, there is a move between epidemiology and let's say, trying to find out what is happening, where the outbreaks, surveillance of disease and outbreaks, to full-time control of every human being, okay? So to controlling vaccination, not controlling disease or disease outbreaks, not how to respond to disease, but just control individuals, okay? And now their purpose is to link health security and to make mandates. So, at the GHSA Global Health Security Agenda meeting in Washington, they say we're going to nominate a country. They choose that Italy would be the first country to implement the plan. So this is exactly what's happening. It's not by coincidence that suddenly there are a few measles cases. This is a whole strategy that has been planned and that is being implemented step by step. So Minister of Health, former one, Beatrice Lorenzin was at that meeting, and she comes back to Italy and she starts to speak about measles scare, measles social media, vaccine mandates. In the meantime, GlaxoSmithKline makes investments for $1 billion, and she has members of GlaxoSmithKline in her own team at health department. It's called Wearers. Okay, so then we have all the vaccine mandates. Very interesting thing during something that nobody in Europe has heard of. Well, at least not in France, Belgium, perhaps in Poland, I don't know. During the campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, there has been this issue about vaccine mandates. So for Clinton, the earth was round, the sky is blue, and vaccines are safe. And her obvious purpose was to have this mandatory vaccination all over the USA. And Donald Trump has said, well, he has a child that has, you know, I think, suffered some injury and has seen other injury. And for him, it was really need to investigate vaccine safety, and also the autism MMR link, you know, all the fraud that was going on at the CDC. So he wanted to set up a commission. So what is happening is that, I'm not saying that I'm supporting everything about Trump, but you have to understand that many, many people have voted only for this reason, because they want freedom of choice. Because they want the truth about vaccines and autism. Because the autism rate is 1 in 36 children today in the United States. Okay? So this is really becoming a very big issue. So 3 days before the elections, when they start to understand that perhaps Donald Trump will win the elections, Obama meets with, they have like a second meeting with the GHSA, and he meets with Bill Gates, and they do a very big funding of this whole global health security program to be sure that it was going to go through, because they knew that Trump would not sign this. First thing that Trump says when he's elected is that we're going to do a vaccine safety commission with Robert Kennedy. So knowing that Robert Kennedy has been addressing these issues of vaccine safety with thimerosal, and they're not particularly, from the same party, or so this is because they're generally interested. However, that vaccine safety never got to see the light. So what I can say is that in France and in Italy, we have a copy-paste strategy of using that whole measles epidemic security threat logic to push the mandates. Okay? Sorry, I'm going a bit fast, but in Italy this has given a rather chaotic result. Sorry, my slides. Yeah, so in the meantime, we have a lot of other studies that's coming out, and also, the data from the aluminum, from Chris Exley, again, is addressing autism and vaccines, but from another angle. What I want to say is that something. Okay, so. Yeah. So, yes, this is very important. So what happens then is that there is a shift from responding to a problem, safety problem, health problem, okay, let's say smallpox, so or responding to a real outbreak, and to just a permanent control of the individual. And we see that is already being implemented in Argentina. For example, with Argentina, 3 months ago, they implemented a law, they voted a law, where at every administrative step, an individual has to show his vaccination record, even if you want to have a driving license, if you want to have a birth certificate, anything, or if you want to marry or if you want to have a job, you have to show your vaccination record. And this is going to be, this is also in the pipeline at a European level. So that whole vaccine safety issue, that whole measles threat is really threatening much more than just freedom of choice in terms of vaccination, because it is also reaching on the free access to education. You cannot go to school if you're not vaccinated. Okay, it's also a problem for access to work. Okay, you cannot work in a restaurant or whatever if perhaps you're not vaccinated against flu vaccines, let's say. Because first, once they have the principle of mandatory vaccination, there's all the other vaccines that will come along after it. So then we have the HPV vaccine, then we have the flu vaccine. Flu vaccine is very important because you can vaccinate the whole population every year. So, polio is 1, 2, 3 doses, but flu vaccine is every year. So, yes, that was in Belgium. I was pretty shocked at the way that I could read the documents. I can see that really government must, who tells governments, national governments, what they must do? This is amazing. So now we're going to have, they're working very, very fast at the European Commission to try to have a unified vaccination program, okay, same calendar for all the members of the European Union. with an electronic vaccination record. It will probably link to the identity card, and then from there on, you can very easily control people. And it's easy to say, you know, you're not good with vaccines. Well, you can't, you know, how far does the control go? Perhaps you can't access to health services. We don't like you for your opinions, or, you know, for whatever reason. We can just control basically, you know, you will get access or not. We don't know. You know, I'm not saying it is going to happen this way, but it's certainly an option, and that's what looks to be the case now. It's the direction that we might be going. Okay, so what is, yes, this is important, because we have fought for human rights. My family, you know, they were in the Second World War, so we have fought very heavily to have those human rights in the Charter of Human Rights. And now, all because of a few measles cases, we might lose them, you know? So, are we ready, you know, because of a few measles cases, to lose freedom of care, free informed consent, freedom of speech? We're being censored. We were censored. Tried to screen vaccines to do vaccine safety debates. We were censored in the European Parliament. We were censored by the Mayor of Paris. But mostly everywhere. They were censored in London. I mean, censorship is ongoing. Now it's removal from the film Vax, from Amazon. The censorship everywhere. So because they don't want people just to try to make their own decisions and find out about frauds. Because what's happening now is more and more people realize that these frauds are going on, and they don't want to be just, you know, the victims anymore. So I can tell you that many people just want to collaborate, join forces, and they would like to, I think they will, because there's really enough evidence, both of fraud and scientific evidence, that say that, you know, that links the vaccine injury vaccine to their injury. So they're going to go after the pharmaceutical industry. We have seen, if you have heard about the work that Corvelga is doing, they're also analyzing the content of vaccine. They're independent research about what is in the vaccine. Does it really match what is on the label? And sometimes I've heard that here for some vaccine, you have double amount of aluminum, for example, in one vaccine. This is not acceptable, yes. Who controls this? We cannot accept that the industry is the only one to control itself. This is just unacceptable also, because that is fraud to the governments. Okay? So at some point you need to make a global calculation, calculate the global cost of vaccination, you know? Because we have to repeat this ongoing. Vaccines save so many million lives, and therefore, you know, globally, it's a good investment, you know, we're going to spare some money. But if you take autism, in the US, if you include the younger children, it's 1 in 36. 1 in 36 children has an autism diagnosis. And so that means also many other children have other diagnoses. It is thought that it's going to cost around 1 billion, it could cost around 1 trillion euro every year by the year 2025. This is a huge cost, you know? So at some point, that's not going to be, it's one thing to say, well, I declare vaccines are safe, but the reality is not by just, you know, avoiding and denying the reality that it's not going to be there. So what are we going to do with all those people? This is a serious question. And if you take, for example, in HPV mandates, France is now thinking about mandating the Gardasil vaccine. Okay, Gardasil vaccine, if you calculate the investment, the price of the vaccine, etc., we more or less, it would be a cost of 600 million euros if you vaccinate boys, girls, and boys. So people know that people are dying because they have to wait between 8 to 12 hours in the emergency room because they need savings on health budgets. Some women just, die given childbirth because they're closing hospitals. They don't have money for hospitals. So next to that, they suddenly have money. They will raise new taxes to pay those 600 million euros for HPV vaccines every year. And this vaccine is not really useful because in France, the numbers of cervical cancer is constantly going down because they have a very good policy of pap smear tests. So they have already an efficient policy. And also the two oncologists and epidemiologists have shown that everywhere was this vaccination, mandatory HPV vaccines campaigns have started. Cervical cancer, invasive cervical cancer has gone up. You can look it up, it's very simple data in the official data. Everywhere where they have mass campaigns, after 4 years, the numbers start to raise. So we're not here to say, we know the truth, this is it's not my purpose as a journalist and a mother to say, okay, here we have the evidence, and listen to us, we have the truth. No, but at least to make sure that you can have a debate. This is what is not happening. We don't have a debate, and this is very, very dangerous. If scientists cannot testify, if individual experts cannot testify, if parents cannot testify, if you have no debate, yes, okay. Thank you very much.